The bedroom had always been a place of sharing for Marta and João, a space filled with late-night conversations, quiet laughter, confession after confession, and for decades, a physical love that once felt endless. But gradually, without either of them noticing exactly when it happened, silence settled where touch used to live. They still shared the same bed, yet not quite the same world. They slept facing opposite sides, as if each carried a secret they no longer knew how to confess. Marta tried to justify the growing distance by calling it fatigue, a natural consequence of the years accumulating in her body. João, however, believed his wife had simply lost interest in him. The thought hurt him, but he preferred silence over risking a painful truth. Nights grew longer, filled with unspoken thoughts and a quiet fear that hung between them like an invisible wall. Marta avoided intimacy because she feared the pain. João avoided reaching for her because he feared rejection. And so, without arguments or raised voices, only with small daily retreats, the couple who had weathered so much together slowly began to lose their way. Yet none of it was final, just the first step toward what they still needed to understand. A week later, Marta and João sat side by side in the doctor's office, waiting for a routine checkup. It was the kind of appointment they had attended hundreds of times before, the kind where nothing unexpected ever happened. At least that was how it was supposed to be. The doctor asked about their diet, exercise habits, sleep patterns. Everything seemed ordinary. Then he paused, lifted his eyes from the chart, and asked calmly, "And how is your sexual life?" Marta froze. João did too. For a moment, the silence felt louder than any answer they could have given. Marta clutched her purse tightly on her lap, unable to form words. João adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable, as if searching for an explanation he didn't have the courage to say aloud. The doctor immediately noticed the tension filling the room. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," he said gently. "But you should know it's an important question." Marta felt her heartbeat quicken. That simple, straightforward question exposed everything they had been avoiding for months. He glanced at João, a look that said, "I know," and he quickly looked away, feeling the weight of the truth settle between them. They didn't answer the doctor that day, but inside, both knew something had to change. On the drive home, the doctor's question lingered between Marta and João, like an echo neither of them knew how to silence. They exchanged a few hesitant glances, but no words came out. Only when they reached the house did Marta finally break the quiet. "Do you think we should talk about it?" she asked, her voice almost trembling. João hesitated, then nodded. "I think we should." The next day, they returned to the clinic to ask questions, something the doctor had gently encouraged. This time they sat down with a little more courage. The doctor explained patiently that the body changes with age in ways many people never expect. Menopause reduces natural lubrication, certain medications lower desire, pelvic muscles weaken, erections become less frequent, anxiety and fear amplify everything. None of this meant that their desire had ended, only that it needed to be understood from a different perspective. He talked about lubricants, hormonal options, pelvic exercises, open communication, and above all, patience. Marta and João listened carefully, almost relieved to learn they weren't alone, and that nothing about their situation was abnormal. When they left the clinic, nothing felt magically solved, but for the first time in a long while, they felt something close to hope. And that night, Marta lay awake, staring at the ceiling while João breathed softly beside her. She replayed everything the doctor had said, but the words that echoed the loudest were the ones she had never dared to say aloud. Fear. Fear of pain. Fear of no longer being desirable. Fear of failing the man she had loved for nearly half a century. João, lying quietly beside her, carried his own ghosts. He feared pressuring her, feared hurting her, feared that if they tried again, his body might not respond the way it once did. The thought embarrassed him deeply. They were so close physically, yet so distant within themselves. Over the following days, they attempted small gestures of affection, a longer kiss, a tighter embrace, but every attempt came wrapped in hesitation. It was like walking across unfamiliar ground, where any wrong step might awaken old wounds. Marta began avoiding direct eye contact, worried João might interpret it as an invitation. João avoided compliments, afraid they might sound like insistence. And so unintentionally, they fed an invisible barrier between them. Still, beneath that quiet tension, something persisted, the desire to reclaim what they had once shared. In the days that followed, Marta and João tried to keep a quiet routine, hoping that time alone would ease the tension between them. But life, as always, had other plans. Marta began feeling more tired than usual. Even simple daily tasks seemed to demand more from her body. João, meanwhile, dealt with side effects from the heart medication he had been prescribed. Medicine that, although necessary, eroded his confidence even further. Family comments didn't help. During a casual lunch, their eldest daughter joked, laughing, "You two only think about going to bed early these days." She meant no harm, but the words pierced like tiny needles. Marta and João exchanged an awkward, embarrassed glance. At the grocery store, Marta overheard two women saying older people shouldn't worry about that anymore. The remark made something inside her sink, a quiet, familiar shame she had long tried to avoid. She wondered if desire really had an expiration date. João, in turn, felt increasingly weighed down. The fatigue, the medication, the fear of failing, all of it made the idea of intimacy feel distant, almost unreachable. Everyday life, pills, jokes, responsibilities, seemed to push them even further apart, even though their hearts longed for the opposite. One evening, after another day marked by careful silences, Marta found João sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands as if searching for answers in them. She hesitated in the doorway, but something inside her, perhaps the fear of losing him for good, made her step forward. "João," she said softly in a tone she hadn't used in a long time. "The doctor talked about starting slowly. Maybe we could try that." João lifted his eyes, surprised. There was no expectation in his expression, only a quiet relief. "Slow," he repeated, nodding with a fragile smile. "I like that." That night, they decided to simply share a warm bath. No intentions, no rush, just presence. The warm water flowed over their shoulders as they exchanged old stories, laughed at small memories and allowed touch to return, not as pressure, but as rediscovery. João ran his hand gently along Marta's arm, as if revisiting a forgotten landscape. Marta rested her head against his chest, feeling something she thought had disappeared. Safety. When they stepped out of the bath, nothing more happened, and nothing needed to. But for the first time in a long while, they walked to the bed together, and that night they fell asleep in each other's arms, a simple gesture, yet profoundly transformative. The following days felt lighter. Marta and João moved through the house with more ease, exchanging shy smiles and small touches that had long disappeared. It felt as if something inside them was finally settling again, slowly, gently. Then on a quiet evening, João gathered his courage and held Marta's hand a little longer than usual. She held it back. The moment felt serene, intimate, as if they were rediscovering an old language. Guided by the tenderness between them, they decided to take a step forward. At first, everything seemed right. The touch was soft, the pace unhurried, every gesture filled with care and respect. But when Marta's body reacted with a sudden sharp pain, she pulled away immediately. "João, stop," she whispered, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. He froze. "Did I hurt you?" Marta couldn't answer. The tears came before she even realized it. It wasn't just physical pain. It was the weight of everything she believed she had lost. João sat beside her, guilt etched on his face. "I'm sorry, and I should have been more careful." "It's not your fault," Marta said, wiping her eyes. "It's my body. I just can't." The silence that filled the room was different from before. Sadder, heavier, and in that moment, both feared that they might never be able to reclaim what once felt so natural between them. The morning after their failed attempt, the house felt unbearably quiet. Marta prepared coffee mechanically, avoiding João's eyes. He sat at the table for several minutes, turning his cup without drinking from it. Both were lost in thoughts they didn't know how to share. When João finally left for a walk, Marta stayed behind, feeling the weight of the previous night settle heavily on her shoulders. She opened a drawer, searching for a distraction, and found a pamphlet the doctor had given them, something she barely remembered keeping. The title read, "Sexuality After 60, Your Body, Your Time, Your Pace." She sat down and began to read. Each line felt like water on dry soil. Every difficulty described, pain, anxiety, fear of rejection, sounded painfully familiar. By the end, Marta realized she wasn't broken. She simply didn't understand her body the way it had become. Meanwhile, João walked slowly through the neighborhood, trying to sort out his own fears. Every step carried the guilt of the previous night, but also the memory of the doctor saying there were options. Before going back home, he decided he would schedule another appointment, alone, to seek guidance about the physical challenges he had been hiding. That evening, when they finally crossed paths in the hallway, something had shifted between them, a quiet, steady willingness not to give up on each other. That night, after hours of careful silence, Marta found João sitting on the couch, his hands clasped tightly together, as if he were holding an apology he didn't know how to deliver. She hesitated in the doorway, then walked over and sat beside him. The distance between them felt smaller than it had in days, small enough for honesty to finally find a way through. "João," Marta began, her voice soft but steady. "I don't want us to stop trying." He looked at her, surprised, as if those were the words he had been quietly hoping for but never expected to hear. "I don't want to stop either," he said. "But I'm scared, Marta. Scared of hurting you again. Scared of not being enough." Marta reached for his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "The pain, the changes. Sometimes I feel like my body has betrayed me." She took a slow breath. "But I don't want fear deciding our lives." João's expression softened. "I went for a walk today to think, and I decided I'm going back to the doctor. I want help, and so I can be there for you. For us." Emotion rose in Marta's chest. "I read the pamphlet he gave us. There's so much we didn't understand. Maybe we just need to learn again. Together." They leaned into each other, not with urgency, but with understanding. It felt like the first step toward healing. For the first time in a long while, their fear seemed smaller than their desire to reconnect. Over the next few days, Marta and João approached each other with a gentleness neither had felt in years. There was no rush, no pressure, only the quiet understanding of two people who had finally stopped running from their fears. One evening, after a calm and unhurried dinner, João touched Marta's hand in a way that felt both familiar and new. "Are you tired?" he asked softly. "Not tonight," she replied, her voice warm, steady. They went to the bedroom together, not as a couple trying to prove something, but as two partners ready to rediscover one another. Marta breathed deeply, reminding herself of everything she had learned. João moved slowly, checking her reactions, letting her guide the pace. This time there was no sudden pain, only cautious curiosity, soft laughter, and a tenderness that felt almost like a homecoming. Marta relaxed against him, her body responding with a trust she feared she had lost. João felt his own tension dissolve, replaced by a quiet confidence he hadn't felt in years. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. Everything was mutual, mindful, and deeply connected. When it finally happened, slowly, delicately, it wasn't about performance or expectation, it was about presence. And afterward, as they lay intertwined, Marta whispered, "We can still feel this, after everything." João kissed her forehead. "We just needed to learn again." In the days that followed, something subtle yet powerful shifted between Marta and João. They moved through the house with a lightness they hadn't felt in years, the lightness of two people who had finally found their way back to each other. Their touches became natural again, a hand on the shoulder while passing in the hallway, a kiss on the cheek before breakfast, a shared laugh at something small and ordinary. They no longer feared the topic of intimacy. Instead, it became part of their routine, not constant, not pressured, but present, alive. During an afternoon walk, João reached for Marta's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. She smiled, feeling warmth bloom in her chest. It wasn't just about sex. It was about connection, the kind that keeps a marriage breathing. A few weeks later, while sitting together on the porch at sunset, Marta rested her head on João's shoulder, feeling the peaceful rhythm of his breathing. The world around them was quiet, but inside, something had awakened, something they thought time had taken away. They had not returned to the past. They had created something new, something gentler, deeper, and entirely theirs. João squeezed her hand. "We're still learning," he whispered. Marta smiled. "And we still have time." In that moment, they understood a truth they wished they had learned sooner. Desire doesn't fade with age. It simply matures.